But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you again so much for being here tonight, Frances. Thank you for making The Long Shadow. It was a great film. I really loved watching it. We rewatched it again last night just so I could have it fresh in mind. And I will go ahead and start off the questions, and then I'm hoping people will have questions that they would like to ask you about the film. Hopefully, if everyone's had a chance to see it. One thing that I found really interesting, and I mean, I'd known that a lot of our economy was based on the slave trade, of course, but I found it really impactful when you said in the film about how things we don't even think about, like Wall Street and banks and insurance companies and everything, were all formed as part of financing the slave trade. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Sure, and thank you and Jana for having me, and I'm so happy to be co-presenting with Ron also, and thanks everybody for being here. Yeah, I mean, so one of the I think one of the things that really stirred me to make the film. Of course, I made it after the events, or during the events. I began to make it during the events of Ferguson. But Sally and I had grown up in the South, where to me it looked like it was African Americans there for the most part were living in apartheid. I mean, the poverty was so great, and so I really wanted to. I read about 30 books for the film, and probably one of the most powerful books I read was Half the Story's Not Been Told. I think it's Capitalism. Let's see, The Rise of Capitalism with Slavery. It's been so long since I've read it. It's on my, I need to look that up. But Half the Story's Not Been Told, Slavery and the Rise of American Capitalism. That's the subtitle. And so it was shocking to me. I had known that, a little bit about it, but when you start to see, I mean, by the time the country's formed, slavery was a well-established, it was the largest part of the economy. And so by the time you get to Eli Whitney's Cotton Gin, you start to see that the value, and it's even difficult to say, the value of these human beings outstripped all other forms of commerce in the country. And so this scholar gets into, like today, we got into trouble in 2008 with credit default swaps and credit default obligations. Well, they were doing the same thing. There was such a frenzy for the profits produced by cotton, which was at the time, the biggest commodity in the world, that as slavery starts to go west, right, which is what we fought the Civil War over, was whether slavery would extend west, you start to see a frenzy, like people going in, like they did during the real estate crash, which is just amazing to think that these two are the same kind of thinking, that by the time you have this frenzy for trading in slaves, and really the center of that was New Orleans, which I went to New Orleans and went to one of the auction blocks where a huge number of slaves were traded. It was very sad, and and it was not even, there was not even a plaque. I knew what to look for, and they still wanted to maintain some of the authenticity of the building, and so you could see the word exchange. So you cannot underestimate. I get a lot of people that say they don't know what white privilege is. They kind of brush up against, well, what's white privilege? And you really see the backbone of the American economy, almost from the mid 1600s, was really based on the slave trade and the profits produced by slaves. And it's a great book. I encourage everyone to read it.
I found that really impactful. It was kind of amazing to really think about that. I do want to ask, Ron has been coming back. We have been joined by Ron Austin. He is a social justice advocate and also a filmmaker who um, interviews other social justice advocates. And hopefully he's been able to unmute. I think he's had a little trouble, but Ron, are you able to speak to us?
Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can. Great.
Okay.
Great. Hey, hi, Ron.
Hi, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Actually, I'm not a filmmaker. I shoot video. Okay, I believe there's a difference. Okay, I did do a documentary a few years ago, but that's it.
Okay. Well, I'll give you credit for being a filmmaker, but if you'd rather be a videographer, that's okay too. So that's great. Did you have some questions or commentary for Frances? I know that you're familiar with the film, and we invited you here to get your perspective on the film. And so I just want to invite you to share any thoughts that you had.
Well, actually, excuse me. Actually, I found the film was really accurate as far as the facts were concerned, as far as how racial prejudice is presented, and how it is believed that it is passed down from family to family. Actually, in actuality, I believe that racial prejudice is ingrained in the DNA of those who believe it, because it has been repeated so often for the past 400 years that it's just ingrained in them. Okay, and unfortunately, I don't know how to say this. It's not something that's really acceptable by most people who would hear this, but unfortunately, although we have to resist against it, I don't think there's any hope for changing it.
Yeah.
Okay, because of how deep it is within the society of those who are racist.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I would hope that's not true. But Frances, do you have some thoughts about that? That is a very deep thought, and I have to admit I have a hard time disagreeing with you, Ron.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Over the last couple of weeks with everything that's happened, it has really laid bare. I mean, I guess probably the thing I would say, Ron, too, I would agree with you in that, there that policeman in Minneapolis, he knew he was being filmed, and yet he continued to murder Mr. Floyd. And it's like I've written many times over the last couple of weeks. Can you imagine what's happening when? Can you imagine what's happening when no one's filming? And so you're absolutely right. It's like in my research, what I've discovered is that we've swept it, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but we've swept it so under the rug for 400 years. It's like white people don't even know they're being racist, right? I mean, we've so said that we're a colorblind society, which of course we know we aren't, and we have to be proactive. We have to overturn every stone, and because it's going to take a long time, but we've got to start somewhere. And I hope one day at a time that we will continue to, for instance, like all the corporate, I got a notice from my bank, BMO Harris, that they were taking half the day off for Juneteenth. And it's like, are they doing that for corporate profits, or are they doing it because they really want to become part of a movement? And we'll see, right? One day at a time. But I understand why you feel exactly the way you feel. And you have more reason to feel that way than any of us.
Yes, well, the thing is that, you know, I'm 78 years old. coming up on 79. Okay, and I have had so many multiple incidences of racist activity in my life. Some of it coming very close to violent, to mortality, so to say, coming very close. Right, even here in the last year or so, within right here in Tucson, Arizona. Okay, I've had near violent episodes that could have cost me my life. Okay, and the people, I've tried to talk to a lot of these people
No, no, no.
that have interacted with me, um, uh, with their prejudice. Okay, and the thing is that they seem to be really seriously locked in to where they're at. Okay, when you ask them, why do you feel that I am less than you, they will come up with all sorts of meandering answers that really doesn't make any sense. Okay, which has led me to think that it is ingrained within them. Okay, it is part of their DNA, it's part of their makeup that I am less than they are. Okay, sometimes they stumble, sometimes in their wording of why. A lot sometimes the reasons they give are absolutely ridiculous. Okay, and then some of them just point to Trump. Okay, uh, uh, so that's why I believe that it won't be changed. But of course, we have to resist. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We have to resist whether we believe it's going to change or not. Okay. I have no choice. Okay. I continue to resist. Okay. Uh, yes.
Good. Yes, there is no choice.
And that brings me up to another thing that was in the movie. And I don't know if you knew that was going to be a quote that you would end up. And I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I don't remember it exactly. But one of the people you were interviewing said, essentially in the United States, we don't have a black problem, we have a white problem. And so I remember that line just sort of stuck out to me. And it really kind of, again, was another thing that hit home. And I don't know, was that a surprise or was that something that you kind of knew that person was going to say?
Well, that was John Powell, who runs the Haas Institute. It's since been renamed, which and the name escapes me, but at UC Berkeley, and he's just an amazing man. And anything he says is good by me. And it was interesting. I had a couple of white people in the initial early screenings of the film. This film was edited in Berkeley. I had some people come up to me and say, "Well, you need to have a white person say that." The line is, we don't have a Negro problem in this country. We have a white problem. And of course, I made the film for everybody, but I really made the film for white people because I didn't want to presume to teach African Americans about their own history, but we have a really great following. We work with a group called the Together is Better Alliance, which is started by two African American women, and it's white folk and black folk getting together, living together, taking trips together. They just recently took a trip down to Montgomery to the museum there. But when Professor Powell said that, I was like, yes, because that really is the crux of the problem, right? We have a white problem, not a black problem. And if you really look at our history, right? See, this is the problem, and I think this is in somewhat is what Ron is talking about too. It's like the problem is we don't know the accurate history, right? Because if you look at, well, the best example or the best definition I've heard of white privilege is that it's basically a system founded by white people for white people, based on the experiences, perceptions, and beliefs and institutions of white people, right? And, white people have had their way really since the beginning of the country, since they first started to separate Black indentured from white indentured. And they created this artificial construct of race. I mean, there is no, yes, we have different ethnicities, but we're all one people. And so this was all done, as we talk about in the film. We really question the myths surrounding the country, because if you look at the founding of the country, because if you look at the beginnings of the country in the scholarship of Dr. Gerald Horne, you see that in 1772, the English had outlawed slavery. They'd passed a law to outlaw slavery on their own shores. So look at the timing, 1772. In 1776, we have a break from Britain, because the founding elite, the founding white elite, going back to what we were talking about earlier, Dan, right? Which was capitalism was already a very well-formed institution, and it was based on the enslavement of Black people or people of African descent. And so you start to see the creation of this white privilege, right? And they very carefully separate the white elite, say to the poorest among the whites in the country at the time, no matter how low your circumstances, you will always be better than an African American or an African at that time. So if you look at what's happening today, whether it's policing or whether you start to see these same kind of white supremacist beliefs infused all throughout our society. Now, we had the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but we didn't, the levers of the American middle class, right? Employment, education, and housing, all of these things were denied African Americans. So people tell me they don't know what white privilege is. Well, white privilege is when you're able to own your own home in a neighborhood where your home is going to continue to grow in value, and maybe you pass a few of those assets on to your children and their children's children. They continue to benefit. And so one of the things that, I don't know if it was in the version that you saw, but so I profiled the Nominee Hall Slave Legacy Project, right, which was Robert Carter III in the late 1700s manumitted, freed all 492 of his slaves, and I spoke with the descendants of those manumitted slaves, and you hear from them what it meant to come from a family where they knew their relatives, they knew what they did, they had this kind of continuity of generational, generation to generation, and all of the wonderful things that came to those family members as a result of that. That is something that was afforded very, very few people of African descent before the Civil War, and then after people, African Americans. And so what I hope is happening right now is that we're stopping to think about these things more. And unfortunately, if you haven't seen my movie, or you weren't going to get it in your 7th grade history class, the true history of the country, right? And they're great books, and I will be happy to share my study guide. It shows the 30 or so books I read. One of the great books I read was a book called Stamped from the Beginning. And so this history is there, and there's some great scholars, and 2 particularly brilliant Black scholars who talk about this. And so I wanted the film to be replete with Black scholars telling this history, because the work is there, just a lot of people don't know about it, right? And I feel like it's my responsibility as a person of white privilege whose uncle codified or helped codify slavery, and went from Thomas Jefferson asked him to take the colonial law, the American law, and make slavery into American law, the new United States law. And so, I just felt it was my responsibility to do that, but it's every American's responsibility to claim this history for ourselves. This is not something that Ron Austin should bear the brunt of. This is not something that other African Americans should bear the brunt of. We as Americans need to claim slavery and Jim Crow as this American story. No one institutionalized slavery. Maybe even Brazil came a little bit close, but no country institutionalized slavery the way that the United States did. And so we've got to claim this history, and we've got to make it right.
Yeah, that's absolutely, that's a great thought. And there are actually a lot of things that have been going on in the chat. Instead of repeating what's going on.
Sorry, I went on and on.
Oh, no, that was a great answer. I'm actually going to go ahead and unpin the presenter view, so that'll make it easier for people to jump in. And I mean, I can go ahead and repeat these, but there's a couple of people that asked some questions, and I kind of like to just get them involved as well. So if you'd like to ask the question, go ahead and just unmute your mic. You should be able to do that down at the bottom of the screen. And I know there's some questions that people had both for Ron and for Frances. And so I'll give you a minute to do that if you'd like.
There seems to be a debate of whether we can ask Ron how white allies can help them in this situation with the rallies and stuff. Is there anything we can do? Do you want us to ask what we can do?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, of course. I mean, because the thing is that I can resist all I can, okay? But I will not change white racist minds, okay? It will take white people to do that, okay? Because it was done by their people, okay? I mean, I hate to say it that way because that puts another division between black and white, but it's a fact, okay? I mean, it was done by white people, and it is your problem to solve it. Now, of course, I and other black people are going to resist and try to change things as best we can, but we can't change this. Only you can change it. So if you want to participate with our activities, rallies, protests, marches, educational events, of course, then ask to do so. Did that answer your question, Jana?
Yeah, there seems to be a debate of whether it's even polite to ask, because I know that some people, me and you have talked about this on Facebook, because some people were saying, I'm not your resource for finding out how to treat me. But I also know that during Standing Rock, that they led the way. The Native Americans actually had guidelines for how the white should follow them, and they led the way on how that they would want to be treated and how they were going to stand up to the pipeline. So I have mixed feelings about it, but anyway, I asked you, and is there anything that you're seeing? You're out there in the community. You're a social justice advocate. Is there any like kind of support or anything that your allies can give these people?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, the thing is that, I mean, okay, you take Black Lives Matter, for example, okay? You know, if you approach them, okay, and if you approach them and say you want to participate, or maybe you don't want to participate directly with them, you can participate with SURGE. It's an acronym. I forget the whole.
Yeah, showing up for racial justice.
Yeah, that's it. Right. Okay. Who also participates with Black Lives Matter. Okay. All right. And they will help you and assist you in the process of what you should be doing and what you should not be doing.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Jana, if you follow the surge, and each surge chapter varies city to city in terms of effectiveness. But showing up for racial justice Tucson is a pretty good chapter. They've been doing, they've been kind of in this fight, and so we hopefully, right? We've never done this before. We've never truly in our lifetimes. I mean, you had the civil rights movement, but now we're in a different era. We're 50 years later, 60 years later. It's like it's going to be organic and it's going to be challenging, but don't give up and don't get frustrated. Like, I noticed that Black Lives Matter, these organizers, right? They've got to eat too. It's like, so I've started to give grants from my film company, to protesters, right? There are ways, if you follow the threads, they're saying this is what we need to be supported. And of course, what we've got to do as white allies is get the political establishment, put pressure on the political establishment, both state, local, and federal, to implement, help the Black lives. This is a Black-led movement with white allied support.
Correct.
Right. I mean, we're gonna go. They're gonna tell us what they need, and we're gonna go do it, and we're gonna apply the pressure because we need pressure from all sides. I think it does have to be Black and white to apply the maximum amount of pressure to force the change. I mean, that's a numbers reality, right? And so, but it really is about self-determination, right? But we've got to do it together to force the political change and the material change. I believe that's what I personally believe. And so the way that I'm doing it, I mean, I spent the last 6 years of my life making this movie, distributing it. And now my purpose is supporting Black determination. Black, what can I do to help you? And I mean, let's be honest, a lot of it, like these young Black organizers of Black Lives Matter, they've got to eat, they've got to put roofs over their heads. We need to begin the process of just like we took $4 trillion and put it into the hands of people affected by COVID. I mean, we need a national awareness of the need to shift assets from the white community into the Black community. And so you're starting to see that some with defund the police, right? They're not talking about completely defunding the police. They're talking about taking the police budgets of almost every city in America. It's the biggest part of their budget, right? So let's get more affordable community policing. Let's redirect some of those funds. And so it's that kind of, applied pressure. And look at the policy initiatives that have come out of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, they're brilliant. So we have to support that, enforce that, and go out into our own white communities and say, it's communication, it's knowledge, it's information, it's power. What are we going to need? Because presumably they've been studying it longer than we have, right? I mean, I can make a film about it and I know it from a journalistic standpoint, but in terms of the boots on the ground in the community, this is what they're saying. Change to eviction laws. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, great stuff going on with jail bonds in Tucson. And, so this stuff has been happening and we just have to continue to show up and act on behalf of those policy initiatives that have been outlined by the African American community. That's the best way I would put it.
Frances, so I know that you used to be a reporter, so hopefully that you know the details about that. But I did see an article on Facebook about Cory Booker has some criminal justice reform laws coming out, and those, if you know what those are called, maybe we can support those. Are you aware of those, Ron?
Yes, I read some things about it. Personally, I'm not a Cory Booker fan, so I don't pay that much attention to him.
But this sounds good. The whole thing is about holding police accountable, which they haven't been. And I always am so surprised that other policemen, there are good policemen out there, and that they don't hold policemen accountable, but they're actually there are loopholes in the law that where they won't be prosecuted on a criminal or a civil level. And so that's one of the things Cory Booker is, has, I can't remember what it's called, but he has a proposal out there. He's sponsoring a law to change that, and also to make a record so that a policeman who is fired from one place can't go to another town and be a policeman again if he's done a violent crime, that they can keep track of that. So,
yeah. So
if I may,
go for
excuse
it.
me.
No, please.
Okay. If I may comment on something that you said there, Jana. Okay, this is the way I see it. Okay. All right. You take the police force. Okay. You have a bad cop. He does something bad. Okay. But then you have a good cop. Okay, that sees the bad cop do something bad. If he resists, or if he reports the bad cop, okay, and makes a stink, okay, he is ostracized and minimized within the systems of law enforcement, and maybe even forced to quit. Okay, so the thing is that you got a bad cop, you got a good cop, but you don't know who the good cop is because he can't speak up, okay? Because he's going to be ostracized, okay? He's going to be minimized. Therefore, I look at all cops as being bad cops because you don't know who the good cop is.
So you guys, there seems to be some questions and comments.
Yeah,
Dan,
I was going to get to those. Can we wrap this up first? So yeah, I would agree, Ron, completely on what you're saying there. And one thing I would point out, in addition to supporting things like Black Lives Matter, is there are ways to support Black businesses, for example. The startup Tucson, Kanisha just hosted a Black business roundtable yesterday, and we don't necessarily think about that's another way to support the community to be able to make that change. But yeah, as far as your point is well taken, Ron, as far as how we change the policing. And one other thing we need to do is demilitarize the police, and there are databases of which police departments are getting armored vehicles and MRAPs and all of this, Gulf War surplus equipment that they're now giving to police departments because supposedly, I guess they have to protect us from invasion or something. It makes no sense to me. But moving on, there are a lot of comments in the chat, and so I do want to go ahead and share those because I know Shane actually has asked a couple of questions, and Rachel has also been replying. The thing that Shane asked, and it's a good question, is do you see, and this is be to Ron and Frances, it seems like we have the same problem with climate change. It's like there's hardly any hope of changing things. And what do you think? A lot of people believe there's a connection between our racial injustices and societal injustices and climate change. And what are your thoughts about that?
Was that to me, Dan?
To you and Ron, if either one of you'd like to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Ron, I'm a, journalist, and so you could probably, you're out in the community as an organizer, but there's just no question that corporations exploit Black communities and put nasty refineries and things like that, and if for every $1 an African American has in this country, a Black person or a white person has $10. And so they're going to locate, they're going to exploit that poverty, and so there's just no question that climate change impacts people of color disproportionately. as does, police brutality. But Ron may have a better answer than that.
Well, okay. We have to look at the fact that our country is based upon the almighty dollar. Okay. Everything that you do within this country requires you to pay some sort of money. The thing is that climate change is being resisted and being denied by the federal government because they are supporting the pillagers of the resources of our world. Okay, the coal miners, the oil, and all that, and because there's such a huge infrastructure built into these built into the pillagers, that they are highly resistant to changing, going to solar and wind and stuff of that sort because of their investment into the infrastructure, and and that's the primary reason. So therefore, our federal government, who is in a line with the mega corporations, okay, who get their sustenance from the mega corporations, therefore they are doing so for those benefits rather than our benefits. But I think I kind of deviated away from the question that you asked. Maybe did I?
I think that's
pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty much related, I think. I mean, it does come down to the almighty dollar at the bottom. And yes, the exploitation of those who can least afford to fight back is certainly continuing.
And then I made a film in 2011 called Heist: Who Stole the American Dream? And it's on YouTube. That explains a lot.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a direct connection between climate change and racism, but the connection is it's about the money. That's all it is. It's about the money. Okay. I mean, ever since my forebears were brought here to North America, it was about the money. Okay. We're the ones that built up the country to where it is right now. The supremacy that it holds within the world through, and it started out with cotton. Okay. It went into other forms of produce, but it started out with cotton, and it's all about the money, and then of course the prejudice, which fits in there somewhere.
And Frances's movie talks about that, of how actually slaves were worth so much money. They were one of the biggest commodities that we had in this country, so they were very reluctant to get rid of that, and then went on to eventually create more kinds of slaves with our justice system.
Yes, correct. The prisons.
Yeah, it's very, very, very deeply embedded in our system, and we need to just roll up our sleeves and realize that it's not gonna change overnight. But we have to make people aware. The first stage of it is educating people, and then act. Well, I mean, I think the action and the education can happen at once. But we just need to have this national will, and all of us here on this call can bear pressure to force that will.
Yeah,
I believe.
I noticed somebody said something about reparations, but you have to realize that if you don't admit that a problem exists, then you can't do anything about the problem. Okay, America has never ever admitted that it has a racial problem. Okay, it has never apologized to those who are survivors from the slave time. Okay, so if you don't admit it, you can't do anything about it because it doesn't exist.
That's right.
Yep, absolutely. And actually, Shane had a great comment here. Shane Reiser, mentioned that I remember feeling disappointed with my elementary school teachers when I later learned the truth about Christopher Columbus. I'm right there with you, Shane. Um, but this took it to a whole new level. Now I feel like I have to audit my daughter's history classes and point out all the lies and omissions and whitewashing that will inevitably happen. And Rachel Port
Right.
added on to that. I only realized what the 13th Amendment actually says a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is part of that whole systemic thing we were talking about. Would anyone else like to ask some questions? I don't want to dominate the conversation here. So,
Wayne just put something up.
yep, I see that. Yeah, Dwayne was just mentioning that both racist oppression and climate violence despoil good living beings and their habitats on a model of domination that removes dignity from both perpetuators and their victims unequally and in different forms. We are trained to maintain and cooperate with both structures. And yeah, I mean, I think that's what you're getting to, Frances. It's really hard to change this system that we've created.
Right. And if, our failure to deal with it, as Ron says, I mean, at the at the bare minimum, we have to acknowledge it. And we have to acknowledge it, but and as he points out, with so much vested interest in maintaining the status quo, but I really do believe, and we saw this with Occupy, right? They really, as quickly as they shut down Occupy, right? I mean, they do fear, when I say do, the ruling kind of elite, the people, the politicians, however you want to refer to them, they do, fear kind of this physical presence. It's unnerving to them. And so, getting out there and protesting peacefully and socially distancing and wearing a mask, I mean, that's a good use of your time. And when you're out there, you're gonna hear things. You're gonna learn really what's happening within the movement and how you can help. And obviously, let everybody know that my film is on. It's on Amazon Prime. Excuse me, I apologize for that. Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, and Canopy. If you've got a public library card, you can see the film free on those three outlets, and with a public library card on Canopy.
And of course, you can still watch it for free through Sunday using the link for Sustainable Tucson.
Yeah, and anybody on this call, I mean, if you want to have a watch party, or just reach out to me. I got asked this, and I give the film away all the time. But we have an agreement. We have an existing agreement with a distributor that we have to honor. And it's primarily at the educational level. The film's being promoted to, colleges and universities and school systems. But so we have an agreement that we have to honor with them, which is why people really expect you to put films up on YouTube right after you make them for free, and I don't make movies unless I can pay the people I work with. So, movies don't grow on trees, but for the most part, people really want them for free, which is kind of frustrating at times, but we've given the film away a lot, and we'll continue to do so.
Great. And again, I appreciate it. It is a really powerful film, and I enjoy the opportunity for people to be able to see that. We've got about 10 minutes left. And again, I invite anyone who would like to unmute their mic and ask a question.
So while I've got a chance, I'll do some kind of shameless promotion. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film's website at thelongshadowfilm.com. There's a lot of stuff there. You can learn about where the PBS stations. There's been the film. We have a 3-year deal with PBS to air the film during Black History Month, but in light of the events, it's been picked up again. And it's airing. Stations are picking it up all the time, so you can find the PBS broadcast where it will be. And please make a note to join us go to Maryland Pub TV, I think is the handle on Twitter. So join us, join the conversation on Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock our time. Would love to have you on that.
Great. Okay, have a question?
I have a question. Yes, I do. Okay, so I'm very long-winded. I'll try to do my best. Question is, like, in reference, I've written something earlier. I'm 35 and I've been out of technology for a reason. So when it's how to use different platforms, or when I use the @ sign and all that different stuff, I'm going, I'm not sure who I'm talking to or if anyone's reading this anyway. People don't, listening is difficult. Even if you can't hear, you can listen. There are different things. Anyway, this is my question, would be in reference to many things that were mentioned, mostly to say, does anyone have statistics, I guess it would be, that are valid on, like you had said, Frances, about 1 in 10, or the dollar of amount that people are making based on racial differences, but on what it would be for females, because I'm a Caucasian female, and recently before the end of last year, my rights, civil rights, were violated nonstop by a landlord, by a roommate, domestic violence, all kinds of stuff about all kinds of different things, work. All this happened to me kind of before March, was end of last year, and I'm not sure. So I wasn't sure ready to join, because I'm going, I'm just sitting home a little too much, but it all happened to me before. I graduated high school in Minnesota. There are so many talking points of my life that I feel super uncomfortable. And Jenna, I think, had said about, well, is it polite? That is a thing that, and a Southern thing that I noticed in the film, it's impolite. I was not taught to ask so many things or say, those are things you don't say. So which, after going through a bunch of this stuff that I had gone through, I was then like, well, wait a minute. This is, like I said to a person recently at a Circle K during quarantine, in that special time that everything was supposed to be closed, where he had told me, no, you can buy cigarettes anywhere. I'm going, great. That's the only thing that's helping me get through this right now. And it's not helping. We all know that. But I had said something off the cuff, like, all white people look the same. And it was to the person delivering the bread for the Circle K. And he was friends with the guy who works at the Circle K. And that has just been my perspective, as I had said this to myself, is I've been treated like a Caucasian female whose rights don't exist at 35, single, no children, never been married or divorced. So my question really is to say, what would the statistic be on female businesses of, Black businesses? I'm so awkward to even say anything now. Going, really nice and eloquent there.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Thank you for laughing and smiling, whoever is laughing at this, Dan. I see your face and like, oh goodness.
I hear your frustration.
With
I hear your frustration, right? It's like, because we're in this new, we're in this new kind of era where our consciousness is raising, we're raising our consciousness about all this. And of course it's the best thing, it's just a rule of thumb. If I don't know how to respond to something, I generally don't say anything, and then I go and I try and learn about it. But sometimes that's not always possible, and you say something that's innocuous off the cuff, and somebody
if you're in the moment, and if you were putting in that, and the best was the people both took, and they took it as fabulous. It was two males, we're both working, and the one person who worked at the K had told me, he'd seen me several times, so he knew I was a comfortable place for me to go in the middle. And I started going out. And after living here for 5 years, decided, in February, let me start going out in the city on my own. So it's like, nice timing there. I'm going, oh, wonderful. You're shut down like a month or so later.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Well,
it's all over the U.S.
And the thing is, you don't, first and foremost, it's like we're in a really hyper kind of politicized. Social media is really stirring things up, and people you know, we've killed journalism and nobody knows who's speaking the truth anymore. And so you know, you really don't know where a lot of people are coming from. And, you know, just, I would just say for your own personal safety and your own, you know, in your own space, you know, make sure that you're not, you know, in general saying stuff that, you know, could get a reaction, because let's face it, I mean, we're in that kind of environment. And I mean, I personally believe, I mean, I deal a lot in macro kind of big picture system kind of understanding, but on a personal level, I know that I just trust my gut and like, okay, maybe this person needs to hear this, or maybe they don't need to hear it. And that's one of those things that, you know, and then we've got this COVID stuff going on, which is also another stressor and pressure cooker. So just make sure you're, you know, that if you, usually if you trust your gut, you know, if you stop for a beat and consult your gut, you kind of know, yes, no, yes, no, no, yes, yes, no.
Well, that was the awesome thing with it is I am best on my own. I lived in China 5+ years before living in Tucson on my own. So all of the things that I've done, I'm going, oh my goodness, well, I can't say a word about my life history without it being extremely taboo at this point. But it's been very interesting to me because I now, when this all started, not that it started, but became very largely aware of from everyone else, you know, a lot of other people in March. And so I keep checking dates and stuff because I've never been good with concepts of time and history and dates especially. I highlighted everything in the textbook besides the dates, thinking that all of it was important. So that's the thing too, is I learned, like, schooling was long ago and was, you know, private schooling mostly. So I was taught a lot of different things that maybe weren't always taught. Or I'm not sure what is being taught now. That's the thing too. Not having my own kids, I'm going, what are they even teaching children? Oh, they're teaching cursive again. Okay, that's really useful. You know, like different stuff that you go, all right. And maybe it is. And there's a reason we need to pay attention to all the things I like to learn. And that's my thing is when I talk, even to say something as awkward as I did, I'm joking. And I'm knowing to always say, like you had said, if you can't say anything, take time and learn about it and then try. And that's not always available. Anytime, even when the police were being brought into the apartment that I was sharing with another person, it was, I'm leaving myself open-ended. I don't know. And then one of my favorites said,
take care of yourself.
It's just gossip. Old wives' tale. I'm not really sure. I don't know. Because that's been the truth. A lot of times I'm asking for more information and I get the response of, what do you think you know everything? I'm going, I just asked a question. How is that being misunderstood? But I think my thing that I was trying to say, really, really short-winded, more people seem to be, I had always felt not American, but I was born here, lived here majority of my life. So always kind of felt embarrassed about stuff that I was taught not to ask about, but that it wasn't, there were things that I understood that my parents told me very early on that I took, that I didn't need further explanation. I didn't have any more questions. It made sense. All people you treat equally. Love whoever you want. Everybody deserves, you know, the equal chances and equal rights. And then, and me having I taught preschool 7 or so years ago in Las Vegas. So, you know, had different choices that I made. Still don't have my undergrad degree. Somehow I have no debt. The weird things that make no sense to me that I'm going, well, that's debt. Credit cards are a bad idea. Don't spend it if you don't have it. You know, don't judge. Do what you can. If you feel bad, say you're sorry. Don't fake. Don't be fake.
Follow
about
your heart.
stuff, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And so it's been frustrating because, but it's also been awesome for me that other people are now realizing, hey, this is a worldwide people are taking note. Why are, you know?
Yep.
Maybe
And
embarrassed about.
Yeah, we've got about a minute left, so I'm trying to wrap it up. So sorry to cut in.
Yeah, thank you.
No,
thank you.
You have to. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan and Ron and Jana and everyone who participated.
Yes, thank you, Frances. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everyone that asked a question. Really appreciate you all being here. Frances, thank you for making an amazing film. And remember, get out there, find out what's going on, talk to people, see what they need, see what their problems are, find out their issues. I mean, we're all in this together, so we've got to deal with it together. Again, thank you all for being here. I will try and post the link to the resources that Frances had on our webpage and in the meetup and everywhere else that we were posting this, just so you can find that afterwards.
And
Again,
Dan, I will. For some reason, my resource guide didn't translate well to the chat, so I'm going to email that to you and Jana right now, and feel free to post that.
Okay, sure will. Thank you again so much, Frances.
Thanks,
And
everybody. Take care.
And I want to point out a book that's that I put. I've been searching for this book that a friend of mine recommended to understand what the issue of people of color face. So it's a white fragility.
Great book.
I've got a link down there if you guys want to read that. My friend insists this will help me understand what they're going through.
It's a great book. A really great book.
Okay. Thank you, Frances.
Great. Again, thank you all. Thank you for spending a Friday evening with us. It was great having all of you, and please take care of yourselves.
Right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.